Now, maybe it's just me, but have you ever had the feeling when you run into someone unexpectedly? You see, we're really good at this. We have different boxes and lists of people that belong in different places. We have the people at our work, our boss and our coworkers, maybe your student and it's your fellow classmates and your teachers, and they belong there. We have our family, our close friends, the people we see at Christmas and on our birthdays and these special celebrations, and they belong there. And we have the people in our neighborhood. You know, the list of people, if you go out and walk your dog, you might have to have a conversation with, for good or for ill. And we really don't handle it very well when people start moving around and they're not where they're supposed to be. As children, we experience this a lot with our teachers. And my name is Nate. It's, as Andrew said, it's our privilege to serve as pastors here at Calvary. I as associate, he as lead. If you don't know, I grew up in a small town in Alberta. So I was used to these boxes overlapping. There were teachers who lived in my neighborhood. You know, see them around town all the time. There were teachers that came to my work. I worked at the library. They would come and get books from me. And there were also teachers that went to my church. But none of that prepared me for this one time when I ran into my teacher. You see, these encounters, they get a lot more awkward and a lot more alarming when, one, they're a person who has authority over you, like a teacher, because you're just not sure. You're like, do they have power here? Like, do I have to listen to them? Or two, when you have unpleasant history with them. Maybe you're not talking with them. Maybe, things were said, things were done. You'd rather avoid them. And this is really easy in the grocery store. Grocery stores are great because you see them out of the corner of your eye, and then you're suddenly very interested in something on the other side of the store. Or you've decided that now is the time to check out. Well, hopefully now is not the time for you guys to check out. But there was one time I was at the church I grew up in. I was doing something ministry related, and I walk around the corner, and right in front of me is one of my teachers who didn't go to my church. We didn't have the best relationship. She loved my sister, and my sister loved her. That's fine. Me and her, let's just say she was the only parent or teacher who called my parents in for a parent-teacher interview. So maybe for you, it's your boss. Maybe it's that family member that you don't really talk to, but you seem to bump into 5 times as much as literally anybody else. You never see your best friend, but you always see the person you don't want to see. And I felt all these emotions. I felt this shock. It was like my heart stopped. My brain turned to mush. My mouth stopped working, all because I didn't expect to see my teacher at the church. She was pretty much the last person I expected to see. Now take that feeling and imagine what Joseph's brothers felt when he revealed his identity to them. We're in a series on Joseph. If you've been with us for the past several weeks, we'll be picking up the story in Genesis chapter 45, if you want to turn there in your Bibles. But this is the second last message. We've been going through this series for a while. But for you, it might be the first message of the series, so I think we're due for a bit of a recap. So here's the story so far. We're in the book of Genesis. And the book of Genesis, and you could argue the whole Bible, is all about how humanity rebels against God. And he brings judgment and all that stuff. Eventually, they're scattered across the earth in all these nations. So he chooses one man, one family, a guy named Abraham, and he chooses one family that he's going to bless. He's going to give them this land, and they're blessed, not just so they're happy, but so that they can be a blessing to all the other families and nations of the earth. Abraham eventually has his promised son Isaac in his old age. Isaac has 2 sons named Jacob and Esau, but Jacob is the one that this promise is passed on to. And he takes this nation thing very seriously because he has 12 sons. But I wouldn't recommend the method he goes about doing it. He wants to marry this one girl named Rachel, and that's all well and good until her father gives her sister instead. So now he's got 2 wives who are also sisters. Again, do not recommend. They get a little competitive with each other again. Rachel's already the favored one. They get their maidservants involved as like kind of concubines, other wives. They're having lots and lots of kids. But of course, Jacob's favorite kids come from his favorite wife. And these are Joseph, the oldest, and Benjamin, the youngest. To show how much he favored Joseph, he gave him this cloak, something he wore. We don't know exactly what it was, but it clearly identified him as the favorite. And his brothers didn't like that very much. Because if that wasn't enough, if he wasn't already experiencing his father's favor, he has these dreams. 2 dreams that his brother and father's interpret as meaning the same thing. There's these sheaves of grain and these celestial stars and planets and stuff. They're all bowing down. His brothers and his father are like, what do you mean? We're going to bow down to you? As if. So the brothers come up with a plot to get rid of Joseph. Joseph is sent by his father out into the field. It reminds me of Cain and his brother Abel. Cain, of course, who kills his brother in the field. And that's exactly what the brothers want to do to Joseph. They plot to kill him. But then they start taking alternate suggestions. Reuben says, let's not get our hands dirty. Let's just throw him in a pit and leave him there, and he'll die eventually. His plan, of course, was to sneakily come back and rescue him. But then they sit down for lunch, and these merchants come, and Judah's like, nobody's paying us to kill our brother, but these guys will pay us to take him. Let's just send him off with these merchants. They do that. They take his precious cloak, they cover it in goat's blood. They take it to their father, deceive him. He thinks his son is dead. Meanwhile, Joseph is in Egypt. He gets sold to a man named Potiphar. In Potiphar's household, he receives favor as well. Potiphar places everything into his hands except his wife. The wife sees Joseph as a handsome man and wants to be with him, but he refuses her until one day she grabs his cloak and rips it off. He runs away, but she uses it as evidence to falsely accuse him of trying to force himself on her. Potiphar has no choice but to throw him in prison into another pit, where again Joseph is favored by the prison warden. The prison warden puts everything into his hands, and soon enough come 2 fellow prisoners. Pharaoh's cupbearer and his baker, they have 2 dreams, but these ones have the opposite meaning. The cupbearer would be lifted up and exalted to his former position, and the baker would be lifted up and executed. 3 days later, both the dreams come true, and all Joseph asks is for this cupbearer to remember him when he's restored to his former position. Joseph is betrayed again, and he is forgotten. Until one day, Pharaoh has 2 dreams. And these dreams have the same meaning, and the cupbearer is like, dreams. Something's jogging my memory, dreams. And he remembers Joseph and says, I know this guy who can interpret dreams. He did it for me and the baker, and the dreams came through exactly as he said. So up they bring Joseph. He interprets the dreams, and they mean the same thing. 7 years of abundance and 7 years of a famine so bad they'd forget all the abundant years that preceded them. So Joseph said, we need a guy to gather all the food during the abundant years so we can distribute it during the years of famine. Pharaoh says, you're that guy. Go do it. He favors Joseph. He gives him a new cloak. He gives him a wife. He blesses him with all this stuff. And Joseph forgets about his family. That's what he says when he names his first son Manasseh. He says, God has made me forget my father and all his household. And so the situation remains for, well, it's about 20 years from when he leaves his house until one day, a year or so into the famine, his brothers come to get food. He, of course, recognizes his brothers, but doesn't reveal his identity. He starts accusing them of being spies, and he puts them in all these tests. They tell him about his father and his younger brother Benjamin, who's not present. So he says, hey, okay, I'm going to throw you all in the pit just like I was thrown in the pit. I'm falsely accusing you just like I was falsely accused. And you go send one guy back to go get Benjamin, and then I know you're telling the truth. After 3 days, the plan reverses. He says, okay, I'll keep one guy, Simeon, who frankly deserved to be in prison anyways. You can read about it, I think it's Genesis 34. He basically massacred an entire town. Sounds like a good place for him to be. And he gives them back the silver they used to pay for the food, gives them back to see if they will sell out their brother for silver, just like they had done to him. At first, it seems like they do because they don't come back because they're too afraid of their father. They can't take Benjamin. Jacob's like, if you take Benjamin, I'm dead. Joseph is already taken away from me. If I take Benjamin, that's it. Reuben tries to convince him. He says, Dad, we're out of food. We'll take Benjamin, and if he doesn't come back, you can kill my 2 sons in his place. Jacob's like, that's not really a cool move, putting your sons on the line. So Judah has a counterproposal. He says, okay, Dad, if Benjamin doesn't come back, my life is on the line. So they go, and they come back to Joseph. He gives them a huge feast, and he favors Benjamin. He gives him 5 times as much as anybody else. And then he sends him off with the food, with the silver, and with one extra thing, a silver cup in Benjamin's sack. He sends his guys after him. They find the cup in Benjamin's sack, and he says, okay, I'm going to take Benjamin. The rest of you guys can go. Benjamin's my slave. So he's seeing if they will sell Benjamin into slavery just like they did him. But they don't. They all come back and stand from him. And Judah, like we heard last week, gives his speech about how concerned he is for his father, how he's offering his own life, that he would become Joseph's slave instead of Benjamin. And it's here where we enter into the story, this emotionally charged moment. Genesis chapter 45. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, have everyone leave my presence. So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, come close to me. When they had done so, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one who you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and say to him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me. Don't delay. You shall live in the region of Goshen and be near me, you, your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds, and all you have. I will provide for you there, because 5 years of famine are still to come. Otherwise, you and your household and all who belong to you will become destitute. You can see for yourselves, and so can my brother Benjamin, that it is really I who am speaking to you. Tell my father about all the honor accorded me in Egypt and about everything you have seen, and bring my father down here quickly. Then he threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept. And Benjamin embraced him weeping, and he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. Afterwards, his brothers talked with him. Now, as we pick up this story in this emotionally charged moment, like any good story, it cuts the tension. It provides us a little bit of comedic relief or comic relief. You see, Joseph has this plan that nobody's going to know when he reveals himself to his brothers. So he sends everybody out, but he weeps so loudly that not only do the people he sent out hear, they start talking to their friends, and they start talking to their friends, and finally it gets back to Pharaoh's household, and everybody knows about it. So Joseph's plan fails spectacularly, but that doesn't end up being a bad thing. His immediate concern is for his father. It's like he can hardly get the words out of his mouth before he asks, "Is my father still alive?" This is what he does every time he sees his brothers. He's like, "Hey guys, is my father still alive? I want to know. I know you told me before, but I want to, really, is he still alive? Now that you know who I am, you can tell me the truth. Is my father still alive?" And remember, the brothers, they're that panic mode, shock. Joseph's the last person they expected and probably wanted to see. Again, the bad history there. He's now second in command. Not a great situation in their eyes. So their brains are mush. Their mouths are unable to move. They're not even able to respond to all this. So Joseph answers the questions that they're not asking, or really the concerns they've voiced before. What we talked about last week is, has all these tests, have they been retribution, payback for what they did to Joseph? And Joseph says, no, not at all. You don't have to worry about that at all. Yes, you sold me here, but God sent me. There's a tension there. Both those statements are true, but I would argue that one is more true than the others, if I can put it that way. You see, God will always accomplish his purposes, with or without us. It doesn't matter what we're doing, God is going to accomplish what he wants to do. And I think that's a challenge to us. Do we want God to use our faithfulness or our sin? Because we see from Joseph's story, he can use both. He's going to do what he wants to do no matter how we choose to live our lives. But wouldn't you rather God work through your faithfulness than your sin? Wouldn't you rather look back on your life and not see how God worked in spite of your evil actions, but because you chose to faithfully follow him? So that's the first challenge for us. But it leaves us with another question. The brothers sold him, but God sent him. But why? Why did God send Joseph into slavery in Egypt? And Joseph answers that question as well. And I think that what the purpose that Joseph gives is God's primary purpose, not just in Joseph's story, but in all the stories of the Bible, in all of human history. God's primary purpose is to save life. You see, the brothers don't know the full extent of the predicament they're in. They think the famine is going to be here for a season, maybe two, and it's going to end. But Joseph tells them there's going to be 5 more years of famine. And that if they don't come down to Egypt and live in Goshen where all the food and stuff is, if they don't bring all their family and their flocks, they're going to die. They're not going to make it. It reminds me, and I think Joseph is purposefully using language like that of the flood story earlier in Genesis, where the people were supposed to fill the earth with people, but they filled it with violence. So God brings judgment on them. But one man, Noah, is told to build a boat, an ark, and to bring food into it, and animals, and his family, and everything in the ark, every living creature would survive. Everything outside would be destroyed. So Joseph is Noah. He is the one announcing to them how they can be delivered from this disaster. And the ark is Goshen. If they come there, they will survive. If they don't, they will perish. God's primary purpose is to save life. And I think that's why Jesus came as well. In John 10, verse 10, he gives us this contrast that we also see in Joseph's story. It says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full, or have it abundantly. So we're left with a second challenge. If God's primary purpose is to save life, do we want to be a part of him accomplishing that purpose? Do we also want to save life? Or are we going to destroy life by our actions, by our words, through our sin? Because that's what sin always does. It always destroys. It always kills. It always steals each and every single time. That is the consequences. That is the wages. The payback of sin is death. Death followed by death and more death. So what do you want for your life when you're making choices throughout the day? Are you going to work to save life or to destroy it? Lastly, the brothers, they have this big reuniting thing after Joseph gives him all these instructions about to go get the father, to come back so they can live, and he embraces his brother Benjamin, but he also does something that's really interesting. He talks to all his other brothers, and he hugs them, and he embraces them, and they talk back. Now, if you have the whole story of Joseph in mind, or if you look back on chapter 37, there was a point, the last point that Joseph and his brothers were together, they weren't able to speak kindly to him at all. The word there is peace. They weren't able to speak peace to him. But now that relationship is restored, and they are finally able to speak with him. See, the same thing is true in our lives. That Jesus came, he died on the cross for our sins to pay that penalty, to save our lives, and through that we have peace with God. We have peace with God. That's amazing. That's incredible. It's life-changing. But we're not meant to just take that peace and hold it nice and close and say, oh, isn't this lovely? I've got peace with God. This is great. I'm so happy. No, we're meant to take that peace and to share it with others. Joseph could have said, well, good for you, I'm not going to kill you like you did me, but, I can give you food in prison too. You can stay in prison. We can wait this famine out. You can pay for your crimes. But no, Joseph chooses the path of peace. He chooses to make peace with his brothers, to not hold their sins against them. And I believe that sort of peace only can come from someone who themselves have peace with God. So that's our third challenge this morning. The first one being, I'm not any good at. Okay, here we go. Do you want God to use your faithfulness or your sin? That's why I'm reviewing them, so we all can remember them together. Second one, do you want to save life or destroy it? And the third one, do you want to be a peacemaker or a peace taker? Again, in your relationships, with your words, with your actions, are you going to be the one that strives, that extends that olive branch, that says, hey, I forgive you. We can work things out. We can reconcile. The stuff you did was awful. Maybe the stuff I did was awful. But because of Christ and what he has done, we can have peace because he gives us peace. Or you can be like Joseph's brothers. You can kill and destroy. You can hold resentment and grudges. These were not nice guys. If you read the rest of the Genesis account, they're murderers. They're rapists. They do these awful stuff. But through what God is doing, even they are able to have peace again. So I want to leave you this morning with some challenges. And it seems like every time I talk to people from this church, They're excited because they're like, wow, there are so many new faces here. There's so many new people coming. I can't keep up. I want to get to know all of them, but I just can't. And I feel that. And I'm excited as well. And because there's so many people here, I'm not able to spend as much time as I'd like to with all of you. So in the words of Bilbo Baggins from Lord of the Rings, I don't know half of you half as well as I should like, but I think I know two things about you this morning. First, there is one person in your life who needs saving, who needs their life saved. Maybe that person is you. Maybe the stuff we're talking about, having peace with God, Jesus dying on the cross so we can have a right relationship with him, maybe this is all new to you. Maybe you're sitting there and you're like, I don't have that. We'd love to talk with you. Anyone with a blue lanyard, anyone you've seen up here on stage, any of our elders, the people passing the plate, maybe even just the person sitting next to you. We would love to have a conversation with you about what it means to put your faith in Jesus, to have a relationship with him. I mean, that's why the elders support me. That's why you as a congregation support me. If I can spend as many of my waking hours as possible telling people about Jesus and serving them and showing them the love that he has shown me, that's what it's all about. Those are the best hours of my day. The best conversations I have is telling people how Jesus came to save life. But maybe it's not you. Maybe you have that relationship, but there's somebody else. There's at least one person in your life, a neighbor, a family member, a friend, who doesn't have this life, that doesn't have this relationship, and they need it desperately. And maybe you're like, Nate, I don't want to do this whole gospel sharing. That sounds scary. What if I mess it up? What if I say the wrong things? What if I actually turn them off from Christianity? Well, one, I don't think you have to be as scared of that as you might be. Just keep it natural, have a nice conversation. But two, we have an incredible opportunity coming up. I know it's still November, but Christmas is coming. Christmas Eve. We're going to have some cards in a couple weeks as we start the Advent season that you can take and you can give to that friend, to that neighbor, and invite them out. I was always amazed every year here and back home in the church I grew up in. There were so many people that I saw on Christmas Eve that talking about not expecting people to be there, well, those were them. They're friends I knew from other schools or sports teams. And they came on Christmas Eve. That might be all it takes. One invitation. That's why people come to church. We've looked at studies and all that. People sometimes drive by, sometimes Google it, sometimes watch online. But most people who come to church come because somebody invites them. You could make a world of difference in someone's life just by inviting them to a service where we're going to talk about what it means to know and have faith in Jesus. So that's the first thing I know about you. There's one person in your life who needs their life saved. The second thing I know, there's also one person in your life who you don't have peace with. That the relationship's a little rocky. Things have been said, things have been done. Maybe, again, it's family, it's friends, it's the people who are close to us. And those are the people where it hurts the most. Maybe you're frustrated with them. You don't really see the point in talking to them anymore because you just don't seem to get anywhere. But there's one person, you might be thinking of them right now, in your life who you can make peace with. Again, I know it takes two people to reconcile a relationship, but it only takes one to start that conversation. It only takes one person to extend that olive branch. Maybe it's a Christmas card. I don't know. Maybe it's a phone call, a text, an email. Can I buy you coffee? Maybe it's not avoiding them next time you see them in the grocery store or around town and taking that difficult step to have that hard conversation towards peace, To make a conscious effort that your words and your interactions with that person are peaceful and life-giving. So I want to close this morning with a challenge. God sent Joseph on a mission to save lives. As part of that mission, he had peace with his brothers after 20 years of sin and heartbreak and betrayal. 20 years. And I know you might look at me and you say, you don't know that person in my life that I don't have peace with. Probably don't. But if Joseph and his brothers can reconcile that relationship, I believe that with God, anything is possible, and that you can have peace with that one person. So God's on a mission. He is accomplishing something. He is saving lives. And I believe that he is sending you on a mission as well, to bring life and peace. So my question to you is where? Who are the people that have come to mind? Where are the places you live, work, and play that you can be a part of God's mission? Let's pray together. Dear Lord, I thank you so much for Joseph's story. I thank you so much for your word and how we feel these emotions, the frustration, the hurt, the pain, and betrayal that Joseph also experienced. But I pray also that we consider his faithfulness, his love, his forgiveness, and that we too would want those things in our lives. We just took an offering for chairs so people can come and sit. And we asked people to think of one or two people that they could buy a chair for that are hoping will one day come, that will be part of a church, that will put their faith in Jesus, to have a right relationship with him in peace with God. So I pray for those people as well, that we would take the bold step in inviting them. I pray for the people we don't have peace with, that we would know that because we have peace with you, we can extend that peace to others. And I pray throughout all of this, as you accomplish your will and your purposes, that you would receive the glory and honor forever. Amen.